And so we begin our ghastly tale, a journey into the darkest realm, on a ghost ship with scarlet sails and the devil at the helm. We go where mortals fear to tread, where angels dare not fly, among the living and the dead, and those who refuse to die. Nosferatu, undead, vampire, the creature who stalks at night. So huddle round your campfire and don't stray from the light, lest you should feel its touch or smell its breath, for then you shall be doomed, for it wields power even over death and life beyond the tomb. So come with me, come. We must beware, for the hour is getting late. If the vampire stirs within its lair, then prepare to meet thy fate.
Mina, my darling, please try and understand. I have business to attend to. I must away to foreign lands.
Jonathan, oh Jonathan, you are my love, my life. When you return, by the grace of God, I shall become your wife.
From Munich to Vienna and on to Budapest, and then after midnight, Klausenburg, where I took my rest. Then, once again back on the train where I slept in dreamless fits. It was on the dark side of twilight when I arrived in Bistritz. There, a letter awaited me in the Golden Nave Hotel.
Oh, welcome to the Carpathians. I trust that you slept well. I will send a caleche for you to bring you to my home. But beware the children of the night, for they love to roam.
At the crossroads, I met the caleche pulled by horses, red-eyed, coal-black. The driver's hand, almost devoid of flesh, helped me into the back. With a sound of rattling bolts and chains, the great door creakingly swung open. And there stood a tall old man, completely clad in black.
Welcome to my house, and leave some of the happiness you bring.
He said in a voice that sounded centuries old and had a curious metallic ring.
I pray that you be seated.
He invited me to sup on roast chicken, salad, cheese, and red wine from a silver cup. I recounted my journey to him, and he listened with the odd nod of his head. And then, when my meal and tale were done, I took me to my bed. It was early when I hung up my shaving glass and proceeded to raise my blade. When I felt a hand on my shoulder, I started, and a teeny cut I'd made. The Count had crossed my room without a sound, the way a ghost would pass. Then, gazing in the mirror, I saw he cast no reflection in the glass.
Take care how you cut yourself. It's more dangerous than you can know.
Then he saw the mirror hanging from the shelf and the cross that swung below. He seemed possessed by some insanity and seized the mirror from where it hung.
This foul bauble of man's vanity.
And into the courtyard it was flung. Later, I dined alone, for the Count was nowhere to be seen. Then I wandered into the library, full of English books and magazines. Whilst looking at the books, the Count glided into the room and asked me to sign the papers, as he would be visiting London soon. When our business was concluded, we talked of his history and race, and he became quite animated as he spoke, great excitement in his face.
I am a boyar of the noble Shekel race. Brave Attila was my lord. Together the Tartar foe we laid to waste with axe and spear and sword. The blood of Huns runs in us warm, and on our hands where we have slain as we flung back the Magyar storm and left them for carrion on the plain. Who crossed the Danube to defeat the Turk? Who fought like Norse warriors berserk? Who threw off the Hungarian yoke? Why, none but we proud Shekelish folk. And now, the warlike days are gone. The swords are sheathed, the war cries cease. No more is blood spilt. The battles are all won, and we live in times of dishonorable peace. Now you've been with me 1 month, and I'd have you stay another. So right now, my young friend, to your family and to any other, oh, but take care, for this castle is full of memories and bad dreams. For here in Transylvania, not all is as it seems.
When he left, I climbed a stone stair and led to my room, and once there I gazed out of the window at the yellow moon. Then my eye caught something moving, and I drew back appalled. It was the Count Dracula, crawling face downwards on the castle wall. His cloak spread around him like great wings. I could not believe my eyes. What manner of man is this that gravity defies? Then, in horror from this ghastly sight, I fled to find another place to rest my head. I found a chamber with a heavy door that I had not come across before. Soft furnishings and comfort I beheld, but still that same uneasiness I felt. Perhaps I dreamed, or was it real? My confusion, I fear, I cannot conceal.
Jonathan.
Jonathan Harker.
He's young and strong. There are kisses for all of us.
I lay back, my eyes half closed, enthralled. The blonde went down upon her knees, and with her tongue began to tease.
How dare you touch him? Leave him be. If you meddle with him, you'll have to deal with me.
Are we to have nothing then? 'Tis days since we have fed.
Dracula smiled and threw them down a bag that was dripping red, from which there came a cry. I know not if boy or girl. I was overcome, and my senses whirled. When I came to, I was back in my room, a prisoner. It may as well have been my tomb, for I knew for certain that unless I fled, I too would become like them, undead. My only escape was down the wall. But what if I should slip and fall? At least I would have a Christian death and feel an angel's rather than a devil's breath. And so, summoning up the remnants of my weakened will, I climbed out onto the windowsill and gazed down into the abyss below, for it was down there that I must go. So inch by inch and step by step, I descended down into the depths. It must have taken hours. I lost track of time, but eventually I made the climb and reached a lonely, stony track down which I went without looking back.
Renfield's is an interesting case. Though cunning, selfish, and base, there is something in him I cannot place. Is that a trace of decency in his face? In his cell recently I was there, when he plucked a blowfly from the air. I could only stand and stare as he ate it whole, without a care. He feeds flies to spiders and spiders to birds. I confess, I'm almost lost for words. The whole situation is quite absurd. Yet something dark, foreboding is in me stirred. Now he begs me on his bended knees, asking for something bigger, if you please. But I fear the spread of sickness and disease if I surrender to his pleas.
The blood is the life is the blood. Oh, Dr. Jack, I would be so good. Oh, Dr. Jack, I implore you. Dr. Jack, I'd adore to keep a little pet. Something besides a box of flies and spiders. Dr. Jack, I'm on my knees. Listen to my pleas. I'd give my eye teeth for a cat. But if I can't have that, then I would be so smitten with a nice, sleek, playful kitten. I'd make sure it wasn't bitten by fly or flea. Just by me.
He communes with another. I know not if God, devil, or man. He creates his own world as only a madman can, in which he is part of a bigger, diabolical plan. Yes, Renfield is an interest in man. A sudden change in Renfield, which I don't really understand. I tried to engage him in conversation, but he would only say, "The master is at hand." As he would say no more, I took myself to bed. I was awoken around about 4 by the night watchman, who told me that Renfield had escaped his cell. The window had been wrenched out. We pursued him to the house next door and searched all about, to find him by the chapel door, talking through its oak. As I got closer to him, I heard the words he spoke.
I'm here to do your bidding, Master. I am your slave. I have worshipped you long and from afar. You promised me life beyond the grave. Master, I serve only you. I am yours to command. I'll do whatever you want me to. You need only wave your hand. Master, you promised me eternal life. I would have all the blood I would need. I could take myself a wife, and from thousands of bodies I could feed.
Like a savage tiger, Renfield fought in a paroxysm of rage, furious that he'd been caught and chained up in his cage. Encased in a straitjacket, he sits, smiling, rocking, humming.
I shall be patient, Master. It is coming. It is coming.
Now he will talk no more, despite the offer of a cat. And he appears to be fixated on a large, unusual bat that flaps outside his window when the hour is late. Again he talks. Is it to himself?
I can wait. I can wait.
Mina, my dearest Mina, I am in demand. 3 of the sweetest men you could hope to meet, all of them seek my hand. How to choose between them? I love them all in different ways. But how do I choose a husband to stay with all my days? Dr. Jack Seward was the first to call. You know, the lunatic asylum man. He was very calm and all, but I saw the trembling in his hands. He asked if I could love him in time, and could I give him hope? I shook my head. Oh, Mina, I don't know how I'm ever going to cope. Receiving a proposal is all very nice and well, but sending a man away with a broken heart is nothing short of hell. Then number 2 came around. Quincy P. Morris was his name. He spoke of us hitching up in tandem, but he amused me all the same. Then he poured out his love for me until I thought my heart would rend. But when I said I loved another, he said he'd be my faithful friend. I needn't tell you about number 3. You know how this letter ends. I was in his arms and he was kissing me, my lover, my husband, and my friend.
Lucy met me at Whitby Station and we drove up to her room. I'd still not heard from Jonathan, so I went to sit amongst the tombs of the ruins of Whitby Abbey that looks out across the sea. Was Jonathan safe? Was he ill? And did he think of me? Then the very next day, a letter arrived, but it contained just a solitary line that he was starting for home and soon, and not to worry, he was fine. Lucy also worries me. She's taken to walking in her sleep. I fear for her safety. The cliffs are terrifyingly steep.
The schooner rolled upon the swell, a painted ship on a painted ocean. Was she headed west? It was hard to tell, as there was very little motion. A dog barking in the heart of town cut through the awful silence. Then, without warning, the tempest broke with dark and awesome violence. White crested waves beat on the sand and over the harbour piers. All vessels ran for the safety of the land as the waves like mountains reared. All except for the Russian schooner, which seemed to be heading for the reef. The crowd gathered on the cliff top, staring in disbelief. All sails full set, the schooner leapt at full speed from wave to wave. Between the twin piers of the harbour she came, the crowd cheered, for she was saved. Their collective joy was short-lived, as the mist shifted to reveal not a grateful crew aboard, but a dead man at the wheel. With a crucifix clutched in both his hands, he stood, shrouded in the fog. And suddenly, onto the sands, leapt a huge and savage dog. All there swore they'd never seen such a massive hound. It was off the beach and into the streets in several gigantic bounds. The only cargo found on board was a ballast of silver sand and several boxes filled with mould from a far-off land. There's a strange addendum to this fearful story. It may concern the ship's dog, the locals say. A merchant's hound was found in a state so gory, with its belly slit and throat torn clean away.
At 3 a.m. I raised my head, and a silver moon full shone. I looked over to Lucy's bed and saw that she was gone. I searched the house, I searched the street, but of Lucy there was no sign. Maybe she'd gone to the cliff top seat, a favourite of hers and mine. As I climbed the step, a shaft of moonlight moved like a sword cut through the night and illuminated a figure half reclining snowy white, and bending over her, a thin man clad in black. "Lucy!" I called in fright. But as I'd reached our favourite seat, he'd disappeared into the night. Lucy was breathing in heavy gasps and clutching at her throat. I undid my metal clasp and covered her with my coat. And from that night thereafter, the colour left Lucy's cheeks, as did her gaiety and her laughter. What could be making her so weak? Such joy! A letter from Jonathan. The dear fellow has been ill. He's in a Budapest hospital and is recuperating still. Sister Agatha there says he's had a shock. He raves of wolves and ghosts and blood and of a man crawling down a rock. She never really understood. But then the letter says he spoke of me and that soon I'll be his wife. She trusts I'll take care of him. So fragile is his life. Via Hull and Hamburg, by boat and train, I made it to Budapest, then on to the hospital where Jonathan took his rest. He was thin and pale, and he looked so weak, and there's a fear in his eyes. I do not yet know what they have seen, but there's something awful that I can surmise. It's all written in his notebook, which he permits me to read, but he's afraid of its effect on me, should I feel the need. And Lucy, the time has come and gone. We are now man and wife. We were married by the local chaplain. Oh, I've never been happier in my life.
Oceans of love and millions of kisses I send to you, my dearest friend. May you both know such happiness that I trust will never end. Mina, you will be glad to know that I've given up walking in my sleep. I'd rather be counting the days to my wedding than I spend counting sheep. Oh, did I tell you Arthur's here? Sometimes I forget to remember. We have such walks and drives, my dear, and we get married in September. Now we are back home in London. My health has become far worse. Mother's ill too, so I must sleep in my room. I cannot sleep in hers. I tried to keep awake last night, but I failed, I suppose, for when the clock struck midnight, it woke me from a doze. There was something flapping at my window. What it was, I cannot tell. I slept, then in the morning I felt so unwell. My face is so ghastly pale, and I'm so horribly weak. My throat pains me oh so much that I can barely speak. I shall try to cheer up when Arthur comes, for he'll be miserable to see me so. What on earth is wrong with me? Somebody must know.
Dear Jack, something ails my darling Lucy. She gets worse every day. Whether something's preying on her mind or something more, I cannot say. So come to Hillingham tomorrow at 2 o'clock for lunch. You can see Lucy alone. Maybe you'll have a hunch.
I found Miss Lucy in seemingly gay spirits as at the dining table I took my place. But once her mother had left the room, the mask fell from her face. I could see she was somewhat bloodless, but without the usual anemic signs. Strangely, she was in a vigorous state of health. I conclude it's something in her mind. She complains of difficulty in breathing, and she does sound rather hoarse. I have analysed her blood and can find no rational cause. So I've written to Professor Van Helsing, who knows more than anyone in the world about obscure diseases. I'm sure she can help your girl. She's a philosopher and metaphysician, one of the most advanced scientists of her day. If there's any helping Lucy, she will find a way. On the arrival of Van Helsing, I took her to Lucy's room. We were both stood transfixed. She looked ready for the tomb. Her face was ghastly, chalky pale. Van Helsing, with her thumbs, pulled back the lips of Lucy's mouth. The red had even fled her gums. Van Helsing stood silently for a while, seemingly lost in quiet confusion.
Friend Jack, there is no time to lose. She must have a blood transfusion.
Then, Professor, it must be me, for I am young and strong.
So be it. I will bring up my bag, as I fear we do not have long.
As I went downstairs with her, there came an almighty knock. It was Arthur.
Be prepared, my friend, for a shock. I understand Miss Lucy is soon to be your wife. My dear friend, we need your help to try and save her life. Your darling girl needs a blood transfusion. Quick now, it will do her good. Roll up your sleeve, my child. Lucy needs your blood.
For the next 2 hours, Arthur and Lucy lay together, side by side, in a perverted parody of a young man lying with his bride. As his lifeblood flowed into her veins, the colour returned to Lucy's cheeks. As she regained her strength, though, Arthur became more weak.
Well, I think we have done all that we can. Arthur must get some rest. And you can sleep easily, dear fellow. It was a complete success. Jack, did you take note of these twin puncture wounds under the band around Lucy's throat?
What on earth do they mean?
In all my years of practice, those marks rarely have I seen. I must return to Amsterdam. Dear Lucy, you must guard, and you must not sleep all night. I know it will be hard.
Jack, my friend, you are quite worn out. You shall sleep in the bedroom next to mine. If I need you, then I'll call out. But I'm sure that I'll be fine.
The next thing I remember is Van Helsing's hand upon my head.
Come, let us see how our patient is. And we walked through to her bed. Gott in Himmel! Is she dead? What has happened here?
Dear Lucy lay across the bed, not dead, but very near.
All our good work is undone. We must begin anew. There's no young Arthur here this time. Dear friend, I must call on you.
And so, just as Arthur had, I gave Lucy of my lifeblood, and the colour returned again.
The Thank you. That is good.
When I returned after food and rest, a large parcel had come from Amsterdam. A gift from Lucy, from Van Helsing, all part of her plan to protect Lucy from whatever ailed her. A great bunch of white blooms. She proceeded to make a wreath for her and decorate her room. I confess to being puzzled. What was the purpose of the garlic wreaths? This was no medicine that I could see, but rather superstitious beliefs. Van Helsing must have guessed my thoughts.
Twixt heaven and earth there are many things. But for now, we shall sleep well tonight and see what the morrow brings.
Mrs. Westerner met us in the hall when we returned the next day.
You'll be pleased that Lucy's better.
Ah, my treatment must be working.
You must not take all the credit, Doctor. Her state is due in part to me. I looked in on her last night, and what do you think I see? Horrible, strong-smelling flowers strewn about everywhere. So I took them out of the bedroom and let in some fresh air.
As she moved off into her boudoir, Van Helsing turned ashen grey.
Oh my God, what has she done? We must see Lucy right away.
As expected, Lucy was in a state of deterioration.
Once more, we must perform the operation.
Again, the operation. Again, the colour returned to Lucy's cheeks. Her health now had become a series of troughs and peaks.
Down in Regent's Park, there's been a to-do. News has come in of an escape from the zoo. We've sent a reporter to interview the worker in charge of a grey wolf by the name of Bess.
He was getting all worked up in a fearful rage, almost like he was trying to get out of his cage. There was this tall thin chap with white gloves on his hands, upsetting Berserker with whispered commands. Keeper, he says, these wolves seem upset. I says, it's maybe you that has that effect. I puts my hand in the cage and old Berserker came. Blow me, this tall chap does exactly the same. Take care, I says, Berserker's quick and he's wild. But this old bloke, he just carries on and smiles. Then he raises his hat and he just walks away. I ain't never seen the like in all my born days. But then, a little while later, must have been about 12, wolves will start howling. So I have to go and see for myself. What do you think I sees when I gets there? Old Berserker's cage. It's totally bare. Bars are all broken and twisted about. I reckon someone or something let Berserker out. I reckon he'll hide up somewhere in the park. A fry waits for someone when they see his eyes in the dark. Now, I don't want to scare no one, but when he needs to eat, he's liable to go hunting down the nearest side street. If he chances to light on a butcher's, then he'll be happy with ham. If not, I won't be surprised if there's some baby that's pram.
He'd no sooner finished when his face dropped in surprise, for there was Berserker before our very eyes. The keeper opened the door at the side of his house and stroked Berserker, who was quiet as a mouse.
I knew he'd get in trouble. Ain't that what I said? He's got some glass shards all over his head.
There is a big bat flapping at the window. And what was that unearthly howl? Outside in the shrubbery, I'm certain something prowled. We were lying close together in the comfort of my bed. Suddenly, I heard the sound of breaking glass. And in the window, a large wolf's head. Mother screamed and in that instant died. Then entered into my room a whirling myriad of tiny specks like a hot desert simoon.
And so I took a cab to Hillingham and arrived about 10 o'clock. Strangely, no servants answered, although I knocked and knocked. Just then, Van Helsing appeared. I can get no reply.
Then come, Jack, we must force an entry and find the reason why.
We climbed in through a window to find the servants on the floor, unconscious but still breathing. So we made for Lucy's door. And what a terrible tableau greeted us. As we pushed the door open wide, Lucy and her mother lay on the bed inside.
My God, what is this disaster?
Both the bodies on the bed were white as alabaster. Her mother had been dead a while. Lucy was barely alive. We heard a commotion in the hallway. Quincy Morris had just arrived. He was distraught to see poor Lucy and asked what he could do.
Mr. Morris, you can give your blood, just as Arthur, Jack, and I did too.
Quincy lay down beside her, and his love and blood he gave her. Lucy was heading for another world. Van Helsing couldn't save her. Her dearest Arthur was finally sent for, and he came to Lucy's bed. He had to touch her to convince himself that she was really dead. Lucy seemed more beautiful than ever as on her deathbed she reclined. Van Helsing approached her sadly to see if the cause of death she could find.
Jack, you might want to see this.
As she turned Lucy's face, and of the marks that were on her neck, there was not a single trace. At least now she can rest in peace. For that poor girl, it is the end.
Not so, Jack. It is only the beginning, my dear friend.
Dearest Lucy, it seems ages since I heard from you, and ages since I too wrote. I've so much news to tell you. I've just found time to write this note. And how's your mother getting on? Oh, I do hope she's keeping well. Jonathan is getting stronger by the day, though his eyes seem too much to tell. So, when are you to marry? And who will do your hair? Who will perform the ceremony? And what are you to wear? Oh, tell me all about it, dear. Tell me everything. I know happiness for you and Arthur will be assured when you wear his ring.
The funeral was arranged for the next preceding day, so that Lucy and her mother might be buried together. I noticed that Van Helsing was never far away, her clouded expression reflecting the weather.
Tomorrow, I want you to bring me a set of post-mortem knives.
Must we make an autopsy?
Yes, and no, but necessity me she drives, and you must assist me in this dreadful task. I want to cut off her head and take out her heart. Oh, Jack, you a surgeon, and see how you react.
Professor, I am more than willing to play my dutiful part, but Arthur would not consent to such an act.
I would like to perform it tonight, but for Arthur I must desist. He will be free after his father's funeral tomorrow, and he will want to give his darling Lucy one final farewell kiss, and I wouldn't do anything to compound his sorrow. Then, when she is coffined, ready for the next day, you and I shall come when all are asleep. We shall perform the operation as swiftly as we may, and you and I our silence we shall keep.
But what is the purpose? Lucy's already dead, and to mutilate her without reason is a sin. To cut out her heart? To cut off her head? So monstrous. I don't know where to begin.
Oh, Jack, you must trust me more than you have ever done before. Soon all will be revealed for you to understand, but all I can tell you for now is that we follow God's unwritten law. Come, Jack, we take an oath, so take my hand. You have declared your love for Lucy, and I have affection for her too. and she inspired it in others, it is not hard to see. You must understand that she relies on me and you to do what we must do to set her free.
We were walking down Piccadilly when Jonathan stood stock still. His eyes were bulging and he looked so pale. I asked him what it was, thought he'd taken ill, but he was staring at a tall aristocratic male who was gazing intently at a very beautiful girl wearing the most exquisite part of her hat. The air of an animal. It looked for all the world just as a mouse stared at by a cat.
It is the man himself. I believe it is the Count.
Jonathan gasped and grasped by the arm.
Yes, it is he. Of that there is no doubt. And I fear he means that girl some dreadful harm.
I drew him away, and we sat a while at Green Park and watched the sunset over the city. Then we made our way by cab through the fast approaching dark to our home, where awaited the devastating. You'll be grieved to hear Mrs. Westermer died 5 days ago. And Lucy too, the day before yesterday. In the telegram's few words, what a wealth of sorrow. It ended, they were both buried earlier today.
During the past 2 or 3 days, several cases have occurred of children straying some distance from their homes. A bit too young to put into words, but apparently the beautiful lady they have roamed. Now, this would be amusing were it not but for the fact that all of these children have been wounded in the throat. It would seem that they have been the subject of attack by small mammals, such as a weasel or a stoat.
I have read Jonathan's foreign journal, and it did upset me so. I wonder if there's any truth to it. Did he write it in a fever? I suppose I'll never know. But how can a man crawl down a wall? I've received a letter from Van Housen who wishes to visit about what she doesn't really say. I've suggested she come this afternoon for tea and have advised her that Jonathan is away. Van Housen was fascinated by my journal concerning Lucy. She asked me to elaborate on it, although most of it seems like a mystery to me. She appears to know what it all means. I mentioned Jonathan's foreign journal, and she asked if she could read it. Later, she said,
All the pieces are falling into place.
she told me she was at my service if ever I should need her, as she gazed intently at my face.
Madam Nina, you and Jonathan are so noble, good, and true. But still, I must warn you of some terrible times ahead. Having read your letters, I know what Lucy meant to you. But still, you can help her, though she be dead.
Van Helsing arrived and placed the Westminster Gazette into my hand.
Well, Jack, what do you make of this?
Until I reached the relevant paragraph, I didn't understand. Well, the marks on their throats appear to be like Lucy's. Whatever it was that injured her also injured them, was the most logical answer I could provide.
Oh, that is true in part, but that is not the whole of this problem. Jack, how do you think Lucy died?
Of nervous prostration, following on great loss of blood.
Ah, and how the blood loss. Ah, Jack, you have seen, but you haven't understood. Lucy made these marks, for she is not dead.
Professor, are you completely mad? She raised her head and softly looked at me.
Would that I were. It would be easier to bear than the truth like this. Tonight, I go to prove it, and then, Jack, you will see what terrible evil in the world there is. Quincy, Arthur, you and I will spend the night in the tomb where Lucy lies. If I am wrong, then the proof will be a relief. But whatever happens, Jack, you must believe your eyes. For if I am right, that truth must be believed.
A little while after 10, Quincy and Arthur came to Van Helsing's room.
I want your permission to do what I think is good this night. I want you to come to the churchyard and enter Lucy's tomb. Once there, may I cut off her head?
Good God, I will never consent to any mutilation. What have I done to you that you should ask me such a thing? Don't dare to think more of such a desecration. I shall not give my consent to anything. I have a duty to protect her grave from outrage, and by God, that's what I intend to do.
Van Helsing was prepared for a flash of Arthur's rage.
Lord Godalming, I have a duty too. A duty to Lucy and to others. All I ask is that you believe what your eyes see. Did we not all try to save her? I as her doctor and you as her lover? In the morning, I would ask you to postpone your judgment of me.
It was 12:15 when we climbed into the churchyard. We closed lanterns and hid behind trees. I looked at Arthur, who was taking it very hard, when I saw a white figure that made my heart freeze. It was Lucy, but beyond all recognition. Heartless cruelty written across her face. She saw us as we moved into position, close by her resting place. With an angry snarl, her eyes blazing with hellfire, she flung the child she'd been carrying to the ground. Then she saw Arthur and smiled with hideous desire and spoke in a voice of diabolical sound.
Come, Arthur, come to your darling bride. I have saved a place for you. Come rest here by my side.
Lucy, oh my Lucy, what have they done to you? Van Helsing said you are undead. How can this be true?
Come, Arthur, come. Lay down here with me. We shall walk the night together through all eternity. Come, Arthur, come near. Oh, how I missed you. Come, Arthur, my dear. How I so long to kiss you.
Lucy, you would seduce me. You speak of another world, but one of darkness, despair, and death. Whatever happened to my sweet girl?
Come, my husband, come. Come and rest your head. Leave the others and come to me. Lay here in my bed.
Then Van Helsing raised her cross. Lucy backed away towards her grave. Arthur stood, grieving for his loss, but determined her soul to save. He drove the stake with tortured love into Lucy's heart. Then raised his tearful eyes to heaven above, to where her soul could now depart.
And now, my child, you may kiss her, for she is God's true dead.
Then she put garlic in her mouth, and with her knives removed Lucy's head. Then we soldered up the lead coffin and screwed the lid back on. Arthur wept as he thanked the professor for everything she'd done.
And now, my friends, one step of our work is done. But there remains a greater task: to find and destroy that devil Dracula. Once more, your help I must ask.
Each, in turn, we took her hands, and our solemn vow was made.
Tomorrow night we make our plans. Our courage must not fade.
We returned to Van Helsing's hotel, where waited a telegram.
Madam Nina, she is coming. I must return to Amsterdam. Friend Jack, you must read her diary. and that of her husband too. And then you will be best prepared for all that we must do.
I met her at Paddington Station, a sweet-faced, dainty-looking girl. Then we made for our destination, my asylum through London's bustling world. We sat in silence for some time, till Mina heard the tale of Lucy's death and looked up with a start. As I heard her catch her breath, I took some brandy from the cupboard, as her brain seemed in a whirl.
Oh, Dr. Jack, I can't believe such horror could happen to that dear, sweet, lovely girl.
In the morning, Mr. Harker arrived with letters from the consignee to the carriers in London of the boxes that had arrived by sea.
Mr. Billington had already in his office all the papers that I would need. As they lay there on his desk, I couldn't help but read and recognise one of them I had seen within the Count Dracula's castle walls. 50 cases of common earth, signed with Dracula's spidery scrawl. Next, on the Coast Guard, customs and officers and harbour masters who had been on duty when Demeter's crew met with such disaster. They spoke of the ship's strange entry and of the tragic human loss. And then Whitby's station master sent me a letter to King's Cross. From hence, on to the carriers who conveyed the boxes to Carfax, next door to an asylum. And these, quite simply, are the facts.
The diaries have been read by everyone. We met in Jack's study to discuss the information contained in them and the kind of enemy facing us.
There are such beings as vampires. We now know this to be true. Dracula is known in the land beyond the forest as the undead or Nosferatu. He does not die as the bee after he has stung. And although he may be centuries old, the blood he drinks makes him young. He has the strength of 20 men. He can assume many forms: the rat, the wolf, the fox, and bat. He can direct thunder, fog, and storm. He can come in the mist, which he creates, or as dust on moonlight rays. He can see in the dark, it is no small power this, and slip through a hairbreadth space. He can grow or make himself small and vanish into thin air. So, how do we destroy him when we find his lair? He does all these things that I describe, and yet superstitions tell he is more a prisoner than a galley slave or a madman in his cell. He cannot enter where he will. He must be invited first. But once in the room, the house is doomed and all within it cursed. He can only cross running water at the slack or the flood of the tide. And as for the garlic or the crucifix, these are things he cannot abide. A wild rose will keep him in his coffin. A sacred bullet will make him true dead. A stake through the chest will give him some rest, followed by cutting off his head. But if we fail in this our task, then he must surely win. For to fail, 'tis not mere life or death. We would become as him, henceforth foul creatures of the night, doomed to never be at rest, preying on the bodies and the souls of those that we love the best. To us, forever would the gates of heaven be shut. For who should open them to us again? Doomed to all eternity, on mankind a putrid stain. But we are face to face with duty, and in such case, should we shrink? I say no, but I am old. What do you others think?
Count me in, Professor.
I say aye for Mina and myself.
I am with you too, for Lucy's sake above all else.
The professor took out her golden crucifix, and on the table across she laid. We joined hands in a circle round it, as our solemn pact was made.